very special guest on the line right now. He is the senior strategist for the president-elect and the senior counselor to President-elect Donald Trump, the original host of this program, Breitbart News Daily, Stephen K. Bannon, here joining us here to talk about the 75th anniversary of the date which will live in infamy, the attack on Pearl Harbor by Imperial Japan. Steve, thanks for joining us here this morning.
Well, thanks. I'm glad, as I listen to the show, I'm glad to see that I left it in good hands between you and Raheem and Alex. And, of course, you got the great production group of Carolyn McGarrett's and Angela Barrett. So you guys, show's still rolling and still hot.
It's going strong. We got tons of callers, a lot of veterans this morning. What are your thoughts in the wake of on this 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor?
Well, Pearl Harbor, particularly for veterans, is a big day because it's it's a day that despite a lot of warnings, we were caught by surprise. I mean, if you think about it, in World War II. They've been fighting in Asia from 1935. I think it was in 35 that the Japanese Imperial Army really started its invasion of China. And then there had been a lot of aggression in the years leading up to that. Of course, the war in Europe started, the shooting war started in 1939. So it was, America saw what was happening globally, but was very hesitant to get into the fight until the fight got brought to their front door on a sneak attack at Pearl Harbor that really devastated the Pacific Fleet, which had been had been forward advanced given Japanese aggression. But I think that the lesson of Pearl Harbor is one of resilience. It's that the grit and determination of the American people really turned things around. And I think if you look back at who were serving in the Pacific, in the Navy, in the Marine Corps, the Army Air Corps, in the Army out at Schofield Barracks. It's really the grandfathers and sometimes the fathers of the Deplorables. So it's that group of people that turned it around. And I think it was 6 months later, in June of 1942, we had Midway, the Battle of Midway, which was really one of the early turning points in the war. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned at Pearl Harbor. This will be the kickoff of the 75th year celebrations. Of course, you'll have the Battle of Coral Sea and Midway and everything, Wake Island, all that next year. So I think it's really important that shows like the Breitbart News Daily Show continue to commemorate these and to make sure that the American people, and particularly a younger generation of Americans, really understand the lessons of it and the sacrifice of it.
Yeah, I know how much you love the callers, and one of the things that we're hearing from a lot of the callers is lots of stories. The day which will live in infamy, as President Roosevelt said. I mean, it really did change the course of history for so many people across the United States, across the world, in that it dragged the United States into both the Pacific and then a few days later into the European theater of World War II. I mean, this day really did change the trajectory of history. How when you think back on something like that, I mean, what's your thoughts? And so many people, I mean, pretty much everybody in the United States was affected by this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to your parents or your grandparents, you'll see that they all knew where they were on Pearl Harbor Day, and all their lives changed immediately afterwards. There was a huge rush to enlist in the armed forces. The country completely mobilized. President Roosevelt went a couple of days later. I think it was 2 days later. I don't think it was Monday. He might have gone Monday. I think it was a day or two later. He went to Congress and declared war in Japan. It might have been the next day. But and then Germany actually declared war on us, I think the day after that. So it changed everything. And I think if you have a chance to talk to people of that generation, their lives were one thing on the morning of December 7th, 1941, and their lives were very different in the evening. And it shows you how history moves. But if you look back at it, it's almost surprising. I'm not saying the inevitability of it, but that the war was being fought in both Asia and Europe for up to 4 or 5 years intensely in Asia, and then it was already being fought for a couple of years in Europe before Pearl Harbor. But no, it's one of those inflection points. It's one of those inflection points of history. It's a little bit like 9/11 was for the United States, right? In that the country was one thing on one side of it, and clearly something very dramatic happened on the other side of it. So it's you have those inflection points in history, and it's for people to live through it. If you talk to them, they'll tell you how radically different their lives were on one side of it or the other.
And the other thing that's really interesting is not just the people that were serving overseas in the armed forces. It also brought the entire country together here at home. Everybody that wasn't overseas, whether it be women, children, they were all part of the war support effort. Everybody was involved. They were making supplies or weapons or et cetera for those overseas. I mean, how it was a very unifying effort for the United States. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, it's sometimes called in history the last good war, the good war that since we've been attacked, and then since people woke up to the fact of, and in fact, Germany actually declared war on us a couple of days later, people woke up to the fact of what this rising threat of fascism and authoritarian dictatorships really the threat they posed to the United States between the Nazis and Germany and the fascists in Italy, and of course the imperial war machine in Japan. So yeah, I think it was a very unifying moment. Plus, there was I think a simpler form of patriotism taught in the country at that time, and so people came together very quickly. There was relatively little questioning of the war effort and the aims, and the country came together, and it's pretty amazing when you look at how quickly we mobilized, not just for manpower, but really for material. I mean, the industrial strength of the United States really came together and really produced. We ended up producing so many goods, really even by as quickly as late 1942 and 1943, we were essentially able to arm Russia, who was our ally against the Nazis, and ourselves and the British, pretty spectacularly. And a lot of people argue it was the industrial might and the ability to pull together all the production very, very, very quickly and focus on war aims that really ultimately was one of the big things that led to the end of the war, which I think it was like 4.5 years later, the war was over. So it was a relatively, quick victory when you look at where we started from, particularly compared to today that, 9/11 was 15 years ago. And it seems like, if you look at Iraq or Afghanistan or throughout the world, what the real, how well we've done on that vis-a-vis how well we did in World War II, where we had intense focus on a certain objective, which was victory.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, the last thing I want to ask you is any thoughts for the veterans out there, World War II veterans, and veterans of other wars and conflicts since then?
Well, it's the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw, I think, coined that term. Just because of the passage of time, we're losing many of those veterans today. I think Vice President-elect Pence is down with Senator Bob Dole and others from the Obama administration at the World War II memorial today, having a memorial celebration. And it's just, you just see with every passing year, we have fewer and fewer of those honored vets from World War II. But it's a day for all veterans and really all Americans, I think, to take some time and to really contemplate what Pearl Harbor was about, both how it happened, why we were caught unprepared, but particularly the resilience and heroism of that day. There was a lot done that day on those Navy ships, and particularly with some of the aircraft. That was some of the most heroic stuff in American history. And really the ability to save some of the ships and save some of the aircraft by people who were incredibly brave really set the stage for our turnaround, which as I said, Midway Island took place, I think, in the first week of June of 1942. So it was only 6 months later, we really had a major victory in the Pacific. So I think there's a lot of lessons there, and I hope everybody takes a few minutes today to pray for everybody that died and for the grace of God that lets us turn it around.
All right. Well, that is Stephen K. Bannon, senior advisor to or senior strategist for the president-elect.